Hi everyone, it's Dave from Doctors of Running, and today we're going to be doing a comparison video between the Nike Alphafly 3 and the On Cloudboom Strike. These are two of the new super shoes on the market, and you've been seeing them on a lot of fast people over the last year. I want to start off with specifications, comparing the two. So Nike Alphafly 3, 198 grams, 7.0 ounces, men's size 9, 174 grams, 6.1 ounces, women's size 8. 40 millimeters of stack in the heel, 32 millimeters of stack in the forefoot. This uses the Zoom X midsole, and it does have a carbon plate and the AirPod in the forefoot. Very stiff platform. When we look at the On Cloudboom Strike, we have similar specifications, but it is a little bit heavier. We're looking at 219 grams at 7.7 ounces, men's size 9, and 194 grams and 6.8 ounces, women's size 8. Now, I saw some conflicting stack height measurements on this shoe, but it is World Athletics legal, so we can assume 40 in the heel and 36 in the forefoot for a 4 millimeter drop platform. This one is carbon plated as well, but does have kind of a unique component with the insole. We'll get into it more later, but you have a pretty, it's cushioned the whole way through, but you have it thinner in the heel, and as that plate spoons out in the forefoot, it does thicken out as well and kind of fills in that space a little bit, and that's what they're calling a bounce board. So yeah, we'll get into that in a second, but I want to start off with upper comparisons first. Now, they both have performance fits to them. They both have a translucent mesh that has a little bit of stretch to it, but for the most part, it holds its structure really well. So they both have kind of tighter performance type lockdown for races so that you can turn, hit whatever you need to, and not have to worry about it. Looking at volume, there's more volume in the forefoot and in the midfoot in the Alphafly. This one kind of comes up pretty quickly, and then it's like decently wide, I think, for a super shoe. It's not the widest out there, but it's wide enough for most uses. Pretty normal fitting midfoot and heel. There's no heel counter in the Alphafly. Well, a very shallow, stiff one there, but really just kind of hold its structure. And this lockdown feels pretty good, but the biting from the laces, you can feel that a little bit when you really cinch it down. When we look at the Cloudboom Strike, this one does have a little bit of a lower volume to it. In the immediate forefoot, it is pretty good, but through the end part of the midfoot and to the proximal part of the midfoot, that lockdown from the laces, it's a good lockdown, but that volume is a little bit on the lower side. So if you are sensitive to that, this might not be the shoe for you, but it does give you a very secure fit. In the heel, I did find that the material was just a little bit on the wide side. I didn't get any irritation from it, but I did kind of feel like my heel would translate just a tiny bit. But for the most part, it was pretty good. I did notice a crinkling in the forefoot just because I think the volume in the forefoot doesn't entirely match up with the volume in the midfoot. You can almost kind of see a little creasing there, even just on my own laces there. But for the most part, very dialed in upper and a good experience in both of these shoes. But if you're looking for a little bit more volume, I think the Alphafly is going to have that. Looking at width as well, a little bit more width in the Alphafly, you're going to have a little bit more of a traditional fit in the On Cloudboom Strike. Looking at the rides, now the rides, although they have similar specifications, they are different. The Zoom X almost feels like a trampoline in the Alphafly. You have a very kind of snappy, bouncy feeling through it, a very stiff platform up front, and then you probably have a little bit of suspension coming from that AirPod as well as you load into the forefoot. Both of these have a rocker geometry, but I would say that this is a shoe that you kind of land into the heel, and you really just kind of explode off the forefoot. This is a very bouncy shoe to it. Very stiff platform. And I won't say a firmer feel to it because it's definitely very cushioned, but kind of a structured feel to it. There's a decent amount of sole flaring throughout the platform. The heel does have that thicker counter on the bottom, but it's pretty shallow. The rest of it is pretty flimsy there. But you feel dialed in and you feel very structured. So those that are looking to kind of have that structured feel in the shoe can find that in the Alphafly. Cloudboom Strike's going to feel a lot more neutral. I do feel like it's more stable than the Cloudboom Echo for those who have tried it, but this is going to still be more of that traditional racing model. Looking at the platform, there's some very gentle sole flaring, but there's not much. And then that kind of bucket feel you get in the heel, it exists, but it's not crazy. And a lot of that space gets filled in by that insole there. So a lot of the space gets filled in. I will say the insole here, though, does kind of form its own little sidewall in the forefoot, which I find interesting, and it actually does feel decently supportive. But this shoe feels a little bit on the softer side, the Helion HF, which is kind of surprising because the Cloudboom Echo felt very firm to me. But this one, I think there's just a lot more give coming from the insole as well before you interact with the plate. But rocker design, you have a rounding in the heel there. very neutral through the midfoot, and then that forefoot is surprisingly soft. And this shoe has some stiffness, but not quite as much stiffness as the Alphafly. And then when you combine that with that bounce board, there's so much foam before you actually contact that plate. It actually feels really cushioned in the forefoot. And so those who are sensitive to that firmer plate feel in the forefoot, you don't get that nearly as much in the Cloudboom Strike, which I actually really liked it for like half marathon type paces, half marathon and marathon. So we'll see. I might race in this in a couple weeks and get back to you guys on how that goes. But I really liked that for controlled up-tempo paces. And it was okay at the faster paces too, but I think when you start getting down to 5K paces, I do kind of like that firmer, snappier feeling. So you don't really get quite as much of that snappy feeling. You kind of get more of a soft, controlled bounce feeling to this shoe. And it just kind of has a nice roll through the forefoot. So very good in rhythmic type situations. And I think this would be a very good half marathon shoe. Not that the Alphafly wouldn't. They're both really good in that category. Looking at traction, I think forefoot traction on the Alphafly is a little bit better. You have a little bit of a wider platform as well. And it's just a really grippy forefoot. But the heel, it's not the greatest there. It works for most situations, but it's really just a platform to land on and keep going. When you look at the platform on the Cloudboom Strike, this is a little bit more of a narrow platform in comparison, but you do have more outsole coverage, and I did feel like the traction in the heel was better. Forefoot was okay. I do think it was better in the Alphafly, but it was good for most conditions. I haven't really been able to run in really slick conditions yet, but I imagine it would probably do okay. But when we look at the shoes, I mean, really the biggest difference is going to be what you want out of the platform. If you like a really stiff and kind of bouncy trampoline kind of like platform, you're going to get that out of the Alphafly. When you're looking at the Cloudboom Strike, you're going to have a little bit more of a softer, more gradual transitioning experience. But not to say it's not bouncy. This is definitely a super shoe and a good racing model, I think. But it's going to just feel a little bit more of a transition. It's not going to feel quite as bouncy and explosive. It's going to just feel a little bit more controlled, but there's still a bounce there. And I think as long as you're running in rhythmic paces, this will feel good. So that's our head-to-head between the Nike Alphafly 3 and the On Cloudboom Strike.